Mitsubishi circuit for round 4 of the ABB FIA Formula E World Championship in 2025. And it's time for Saturday's third practice. Green light's about to go on then, ready for the third practice session here on Saturday, not Sunday. Let's cross over to your commentary team, Tom Brooks, alongside Casey and David Coulthard and Corinne Channock.
In the office with Porsche. More on that a little bit later. Max Günther, courtesy of scoring a maximum of 29 points yesterday, and now elevates himself into third in the Drivers' Championship. Let's have a look at the drivers then getting themselves ready for action here for round 4 today. This is the man who is riding the crest of a wave, Maximilian Günther. A couple of drivers who will be hoping for better fortunes are Mitch Evans and Jean-Eric Vergne. Likewise, Nick Cassidy, he's currently still pointless in the drivers' standings for season 11. And the two Andretti drivers both failed to finish yesterday as well. So a chance for them and a bit of redemption here later on this afternoon as we head into the second E-Prix of the weekend. So a new challenge for the drivers here this weekend. The Jeddah Corniche circuit is the venue. Let's have a closer look at this one then. 3 kilometres long. Casey Mullings, it's a brilliant circuit, this one. Drivers seem to like it, and it's provided some great action here.
It has. It's got a bit of everything, really. It's quite tight in the chicanes. We've seen a bit of action there. But yeah, I think less action than we were expecting in terms of accidents, I think, yesterday. There's a bit more runoff room, which I think gives people a bit more space if you need to use it, especially in the mid-pack, which is nice because then obviously less safety cars and more racing.
Well, the chicane down at turn 8 was the scene of some incidents yesterday, especially on the opening lap. This is turn 13 when the attack mode will be activated. Then we head through to the final couple of chicanes to complete the lap. Turns 18 was where the race was decided on the final lap. Oliver Rowland was leading going into there, but ran out of energy at a critical moment, allowing Max Günther to scythe his way past in the DS Penske to take his first victory for that team. You can see 27 degrees track temperature, air temperature 26 degrees. About half an hour, 45 minutes or so ago, though, we had a brief shower. It rained last night here, and you can see the probability of rain is still quite low now this afternoon, but it's a lot more humid, a lot more sticky in the air here today, Corinne, than it was this time yesterday.
Yeah, you don't expect rain in the desert, do you? But we got some last night and again this morning. The track does look dry, though, looking at that camera shot. I think because it is still quite warm, it dries up pretty quickly, and it's a strong breeze outside. If you walk down the South Finish Straight, there's quite a strong headwind down the South Finish Straight. So the good news for the drivers, of course, is that there's no conversation around choosing tyres because they have the same ones whether it rains or it doesn't.
Yeah, very true. This is Max Günther then, man who won that race in brilliant style yesterday. He's got to be riding the crest of a wave now. Amazing bit of driving from him in qualifying to get it onto pole position. Took the fastest lap in the race yesterday, took that victory in the closing stages in the final couple of corners. Amazing job from him.
Yeah, I think there was a moment when we were sat here kind of discounting him. He came out of the pit boost in the pit lane. I think he was in 9th or 8th.
Yep.
And it just shows the attack mode this year and how powerful and how much of an effect that can have if you use it in the right way.
Yeah, and that's the thing for Max Günther, is that basically what he did was waited until he'd done his pit boost stop to then use the 2 attack modes, whereas other drivers had done that, but they pitted earlier than him. So he was a little bit out of sequence compared to everybody else, but fortunately the field was all quite bunched up, so when he went into attack mode, which gives you about 1.5, sometimes 2 seconds of a pace advantage per lap, you can then get your way through relatively easier compared to what it would be like normally. So green flag flies then, FP3 gets underway as the cars exit their way onto the circuit for the first time on Saturday afternoon here in Jeddah. This is out of turn 2, where the circuit funnels onto, or the pit lane funnels onto the circuit rather. See down at turn 4 as well. Also the scene of some incidents on that opening lap yesterday. Quite a scrappy opening lap that we saw, especially for the 2 TAC Heuer Porsches, Corinne. They were both in the wars. Pascal Wehrlein being the one who ended up worse off.
Yeah, it was a real, it was a real shame for them because obviously Wehrlein was the innocent victim there of Mitch Evans getting slightly caught out, running at the back of him, giving him a puncture, and then Da Costa got hit from behind, and then later in the race, obviously down the top lane. But it was Nico Müller, wasn't it, the one who had the biggest accident of the lot, flying up sideways against the wall. He was lucky he didn't completely go over like we saw with Pascal Wehrlein in Brazil.
Yeah, not a happy day for the Andretti team. You can see a big lock-up there for Nico Müller as he comes down in towards turn 13. And it's an interesting point that actually as well, as we just look at him making a bit of a meal of the braking zone down at that corner, because it's something they've been struggling with for the last 18 months, the Andretti team, especially Jake Dennis on the other side of that garage. His constant complaint last year was the feeling that he was getting under braking. Spoke to him on the grid, still much the same, and the results yesterday speak for themselves.
Yeah, but I don't fully understand it, because they were fast in Brazil and in Mexico, and it's like they've come here and again something's changed. So, you know, he's I think Müller, that's I believe the third lockup on just his outlap, so clearly something on point.
I have
So,
a puncture rear left alarm. Error purple 4, error green 0.
So that might have something to do with it then.
Once TPMS will be picked up.
So, technical problem then, seemingly, for Nico Müller. He's out on track at the moment. You can see there, though, our virtual race engineer thinks there's potential for rain in qualifying, as if we need another twist in the tail. That would make things hugely exciting. Qualifying taking place here this afternoon, 3 local time. So what's that, 2 hours, 20 minutes there and thereabouts. So it is quite muggy, it is quite humid. You can see it's a lot more overcast than it was this time yesterday as well. We had bright sunshine for free practice too, whereas, as you can see, the conditions are a little bit different here for FP3. Given the fact that we had that rain earlier on, Katie, the track has dried out because it's so humid and so warm here. It's nothing really to worry about for this session, but if there is this possibility of rain, as our virtual race engineer says, we're going into that pretty much blind.
Yeah, it'll be a pretty exciting qualifying. Who can nail that? As we know with Formula E, it's pretty complicated to try and figure out how to get the tyres in the best window. So I'm sure it might be a little bit different in terms of strategy on how to do that if we do see some more rain, because yesterday we didn't have any in sight at this time at all.
Well, unlike yesterday, no pit boost stops for the drivers to contend with for round 4. It's an out-and-out charge from lights out to the checkered flag. 31 laps, same race distance, 2 attack modes available for the drivers under racing conditions. And fortunately, we didn't see that much in the way of penalties and problems for the drivers in the race yesterday.
No, if he'd parked like that yesterday, he would have got a penalty outside his pit box. But yeah, listen, I really enjoyed yesterday's race. I really, you know, I think a lot of people are sort of focusing on looking at the strategy based on the state of charge, and I think it sometimes was a bit confusing because you're trying to work out attack modes plus pit stop plus another attack mode afterwards. But actually, I really enjoyed it. I thought, like, in a pure motor racing sense, people used the strategy well to move up, others lost out, and then it got jumbled up and it got settled on the last lap, last corner. So I thought it was an excellent motor race in general, really.
And the thing is, with that type of race, well, given the fact it's a bit of an unknown, there's always going to be a variable, someone who perhaps ends up sharper up the grid than maybe they should have been on pure pace. For example, Dan Tickton was a driver who was right up the sharp end of the grid at points during the race, and then he ended up being quite unlucky. Came into the pit box, had to do a reset before he could take his pit boost charge, and then they had to do some repairs afterwards, and that compounded what could have otherwise been a very promising result for Kiro.
So he came in, had to do some sort of reset?
Yeah, exactly that, yeah. So he came into the stop, and he was on the team radio, and they said...
Was he happy about that?
No, he was, unsurprisingly, not very happy about it. It was, I'm glad we didn't broadcast it, because we'd have ended up with probably fines from the FIA for something like that, really. But yeah, unfortunate for Dan Tickton and for the Cooper Kiro team. Unfortunate also for this man here, Oliver Rowland, came within 2 corners of a second successive victory. I have to say, very magnanimous in defeat yesterday after a bit of a crushing result coming down to those last couple of corners. He just ran out of energy, didn't he? He had 0.4%. We were seeing it ticking down on the graphic, and the interesting point for me is that he pulled out quite a significant gap in the mid-stages of the race, Katie, and then ended up having to back off and save a little bit. What do you think that was down to? Is that just down to a miscalculation from the team, miscommunication between driver and engineer? What went on?
Yeah, I think it was that. I think after the race, in some interviews, he was saying he was a bit frustrated, and on the radio to the team saying, you know, why didn't you tell me earlier that he had an extra % behind me? So, yes, you've got your own run plan and you've got your own targets to meet, but actually you've got to keep an eye on the wider picture there, and I think he felt like he could have done with a bit more information. But it's not like you don't want to pull any gaps, because a race can be won with gaps. You know, if we look back to Diriyah here last year, Jake Dennis won by 13 seconds. So you can make a strategy like that work. You don't have to stay in the bunch, but I think you've got to have a few eyes on the rest of the grid. But there's a lot going on for their engineers to try and look at, you know, with the pit boost and the attack modes.
Yeah, I think they lost that race, personally, because I think there was that phase where he opened up 3.5 seconds. And I think the 0.8 last year worked for Jake because the team were watching everyone else's energy and saying to him, you're still pretty much the same as everybody else, maybe a little bit down, but we have enough of a buffer. In Roland's case, he was down. He was down 1%. He'd gone from being 1% up to 1% down. And that really, that's the responsibility of the team to be able to spot that. Is once the pit stops were done, you're not watching the whole pack. You've only got to watch 3 or 4 cars that you're racing at that stage. And I just don't think they did a good enough job of spotting it early enough. And yeah, it cost them the win.
Well, lessons to be learned for the Nissan team. Great day on the other side of the coin, though, for the Neil McLaren outfit. Double points finish for them. Sam Bird in 8th, but also Taylor Barnard in 3rd place. A 2nd podium in 3 races. Saunders is down in pit lane, catching up with team principal Ian James.
Absolutely, well said, Tom. Let's talk about Taylor Barnard, a sensation in Formula E, taking to electric racing like a duck to water.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great to see him get the 2nd podium now of the season, the 2nd in 3 races. And I think there's more to come from him. So, yeah, very, very pleased with the performance.
It feels like we are just maybe races or a race away from him breaking records and being the youngest driver to be pole position and even race win.
Well, let's hope it is a race away. That'd be nice. But listen, step by step, I think Taylor's doing a fantastic job. The work, the collaboration that he has with Sam as well is phenomenal. So we've always looked at drivers not in terms of just how fast they are. Clearly, that's one of the most important, if not the most important criteria. But how they work together with the team and how they play a role within the development of the team. And both Sam and Taylor have been brilliant in that regard.
Well, it wouldn't be right as 2 Brits not to talk about the weather, because we've got 25% or by our references of rain today. How might that change things?
Well, I think it's anybody's guess as to exactly what's going to happen. Our head of strategy said earlier that he can't stand the fact that we're near the sea. I think that's playing a key role in this, and it's just very, very difficult to predict at the moment exactly what's going to happen. I remember that race in Didier 6 years ago when we had that downpour that cancelled FP1 and then caused chaos in the race. So anything can happen. We just got to stay on our toes and make sure we can adapt.
Thanks, Ian.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Saunders. Thank you to Ian James, team principal of Neil McLaren as well. Driver's eye view here for Taylor Barnard. This is, of course, in 2-wheel drive at the moment, not in the full attack mode lap. You can see just how much the car's moving underneath Barnard here, Katie. He's having to do constant corrections of the steering, especially in the high-speed stuff.
Yeah, I think the steering is pretty heavy on these cars, so it's a really physical job to do. I'm sure Corinne can tell us a bit more about what it's like to race them, but it's definitely not a relaxing environment.
Hang on, says someone who jumps around the desert.
We have power steering.
Well,
so Taylor Barnard over the line then in 9th position at the moment. Teammate Sam Bird in 13th place for Neil McLaren at this early stage of FP3 here. Yes, racing then as well. Again, difficult day at the office for that outfit. Nick Cassidy, 11th place for him. No points on the board so far in 2025. Let's just touch on that briefly, because if you remember, he was the man who was ultra consistent right up until we got to Portland last year, Katie. The title slipped through his fingers, and ever since then he's struggled to get in the right sort of window that he needs to. He's just not had luck, not had performance, whatever it may happen to be. He's just sort of not been there so far.
Yeah, he's definitely frustrated around the paddock. I think you can see it in his body language and his frustration when he gets out of the car. I think in general, though, as Mitch was saying yesterday, pretty much every time we spoke to him, that they're having a hard time of it, and he was surprised to make it into the duels yesterday because he felt like they just weren't able to get anywhere. So I don't know how much they kind of changed or learned or adapted overnight. I'm sure it would have been a late night here for their engineers.
They seem to be struggling for chassis balance as such. You know, the car doesn't rotate as well as the Nissan, for example. It doesn't have the braking stability of most others, including the Mahindra. They've sort of got this disconnect. Either they can get front grip or they can get rear grip. They're really struggling to get all 4. And with a fresh set of tyres and qualifying, you know, they can drag a lap out of it, as Evans did yesterday. but consistently in the race, they just don't have the balance and the performance.
Well, so put some meat on the bones for that for me, because if you looked at last year, that was one of the most set-up cars. Everything looked great when they were out on track. What's changed between now and then? Why are they now struggling?
I think they're trying to find the answer. The big thing's got to be the tyres. Ultimately, you know, there are 4 things that connect all of the other 10,000 components on that race car to the ground, and that's tyre. And the tyres changed between last year and this year, and for whatever reason, the Jaguar team are struggling to unlock that performance. You know, I think one of the things I heard yesterday was, is it a coincidence that you know, Gunther, who's just on the top of the times here, won yesterday and they've managed to unlock performance? Is it a coincidence that Phil Charles has moved from Jaguar to DS Penske, and you know, is he being a key person in terms of being able to have that knowledge of how to unlock performance out of a different tyre?
Yeah, he's very highly rated, is Phil Charles. Can't be understated exactly the differences that he's making down at DS Penske. It's taken him a little bit of time to sort of get his house in order, really, and make sure that you've got the right efficiencies within the right department and so on and so forth. But now you can see DS Penske, as we saw yesterday, fighting at the sharper end of the grid. Let's see whether 24 hours later we get a similar sort of result, or whether the results get turned on their head. Let's have a look at Sebastian Buemi, just making his way through turn 4 at the moment. He's on a full attack mode lap here by the looks of things, in 4-wheel drive.
They've had a pretty torrid weekend, haven't they? They've had a range of reliability problems. But, you know, so I was talking to some of the people in the team yesterday, and they went through this catalogue of issues with inverters and you know, all sorts of reliability issues that they've had over the weekend. I think both cars were changing bits and pieces right up until the start of qualifying for Freins and the start of the race for Buemi, and that's a big concern, because don't forget, that's another Jaguar team. You know, they obviously the works team struggling for performance, but their customer team struggling for performance and reliability. And they were pretty disgruntled yesterday, actually, about the reliability issues for their cars.
Yeah, not surprised at all, because it put them on the back foot, especially for Robin Freins going into qualifying with that lack of running that he had in free practice too. And they just spent the rest of the weekend chasing their tail, really. Buemi comes across the line then in his full attack power lap with 350 kilowatts and 4-wheel drive to go top of the pile by 1.5 seconds over Max Gunther. There's his race engineer, Connor Somerville. That's the other person you'll hear on team radio for the former world champion. Robin Freins coming 4th quickest at the moment. Edo Mortara, I have to say, very impressive result for him yesterday with Mahindra. He started right at the very back of the field, courtesy of not being able to set a lap time in qualifying, suffering a technical problem. Not quite sure exactly what that is. I went down and spoke to the team, they weren't sure either, so a bit of dissecting to go on there. But he managed to recover in the race to get himself into 7th position, so that was really impressive.
Yeah, just talking to Mitch Evans yesterday, he was saying actually that Mahindra has got very, very good braking stability, and they're able to sort of brake and turn into slow corners better, he thinks, better than anyone else. And as we were saying yesterday, this circuit layout favors that characteristic. You know, you've got lots of slow corners where you have to, and none of the straights are straight. You know, so you're kind of braking and turning in most of these places, as we see here into 13. I think that helped them out.
I'm interested, Corinne, when you've got so many pieces like the pit boost, the attack, the energy management, in a team like that, when you were racing, how many engineers do you have with eyes on, and how many roles have they got to play? One man, is it one man, one job, or are they?
I think nowadays it's capped anyway, so I think the teams are allowed. Oh, there's a yellow flag.
Yeah, someone stops.
It's off straight.
Let's have a look at Jake Hughes. Yeah, Jake Hughes has stopped on the start-finish straight in the Maserati. If you can't get that car going, there's a good probability that we'll get a red flag in this session, because it's in quite a precarious place, one of the fastest parts of the circuit. So technical problems seemingly then for the Maserati, and hopefully they can do a bit of control-alt-deleting on the car and get it back up and running. We saw that yesterday with Robin Freins' car just ground to a halt, and there we go. Back onto the circuit, and thankfully negates the use of a red flag, curtailing everybody's running in the session. Hopefully we'll get a replay and see what happened there.
I bet he stopped.
Have you got the lottery numbers for next Thursday, by the way?
I think I'll need to box.
Well, that's a shame there for Jake Hughes, because well, hopefully it's only a minor issue and they're able to get him back out before the session, because we've still got 24 minutes of it left to go. And when you end up with a problem like this, Katie, where your car comes to a stop and there's a possibility that your session could come short, we saw it yesterday with Robin France, you just end up, as I said earlier on, chasing your tail.
Yeah, it is, especially when you consider how tight the margins are for qualifying. If you have any problems in practice, each lap we're going to have a different run plan, a different thing to test, maybe a different setup, especially as we saw earlier with Andretti. I'm sure they've got a few different settings they want to try with the brakes. Any delay disrupts that, and you have to reprioritise what you think you need to test if you get any more running time. So it can be frustrating, because you can finish a session without actually having done a fast lap and knowing where you're going to sit for qualifying.
So let's have a look here at Oliver Rowlands. He makes his way around. Personal best in that first sector. He's only on a normal push lap at the moment. You can see the lights on the back of the car illuminated blue. When he's on a full attack mode lap and in four-wheel drive, those lights will go to a magenta colour. But Rowland hasn't really set a representative lap time in this session so far. So see what the Nissan driver can do. You hear the tyres chirping. A little bit wide going there into turn 13, but too bad so far for him. Quite a few lap time improvements as you're coming in at this particular stage in the session. Rowland there out of the penultimate chicane. This is where the race was decided yesterday on the final lap, and this is where Rowland unfortunately lost the victory in the closing stages of it. See where he goes in terms of the lap times as he comes across the timing line, past where Jake Hughes' car was stricken a few moments ago, and Rowland goes up into 8th fastest. So this lap time there for Oliver Rowland. See a few attack mode laps now beginning to come in, and you can see Jake Hughes now being wheeled back into the garage. So what's going to be going on there with that team? They're obviously going to have to work out what went wrong for a start there, Karun, but do you think there could be session over for the Briton?
It depends what the problem is, isn't it? If it's a software thing that they can, fail a sensor or reset a part of the system or something, then they can get them straight back out. If it's a hardware issue, then it might be more problematic. So 20 minutes is tight. If it's a hardware issue, depending what it is, if you've got a small part of a sensor that's creating an issue, that could be fine. But yeah, we'll see.
It certainly will. On board here with Lucas Di Grassi, disqualified from the race yesterday. It was a difficult day anyway for the Lola Yamaha app team. Both Di Grassi and Maloney suffering penalties going into the race and starting right at the back of the field.
We could do now one more shot, then in, scrap tyre, and then we have 3 more push laps for the third outing.
Why was he disqualified yesterday?
I'm just about to work that out.
Oh, right, okay.
Leave it with me, I'll get back to you. Hold the line, caller.
Okay. We'll chat about something else, Katie, shall we?
Sit here and stare at Tom until you find him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just sat there scrabbling madly for my notes. But yeah, I have to say, it was going to be a difficult day at the office for both of those drivers and the teams going into that race with the penalties. Ultimately, Di Grassi came over the line in 16th, Zay Maloney in 17th place. There's still no points on the board for that Lola Yamaha app team. But I mean, let's be fair to them. It's a new venture for the apt outfit with Lola, with Yamaha. It's going to take a bit of time to bed everything together, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting as well that they've got obviously the experience and the new energy in the team. I think it will make a great combination, but as you say, the teams that are fighting at the front have got a lot of experience, and I imagine that they're trying to learn every single lap at the minute to try and play a bit of catch-up. So they were quite excited, though, with the new format of Pit Boost. They were saying that it brings a new element, it brings another strategy. They could play a different card differently to the other teams, where they perhaps can't match them on overall race pace, but they might get lucky, and that might help them try and get some points on the board early in the season.
Just come through on the notice board.
Only corners that I'm struggling a little bit is turn 4, understeer mid corner, the front is shattering.
So Van Dorn not happy with the balance of his Maserati at the moment. Di Grassi disqualified for overuse of energy during the race, by the way, yesterday. So not ideal at all there for that team.
We're seeing that a bit since the new attack mode. I think the Nissans were having that at the beginning of the season, if I remember right.
Yeah, they were suffering overpowering at that race, weren't they? Because that cost Rowland, as well as the two McLarens, quite dearly, because they suffered drive-through penalties in the race. So Yeah, it's not the first time we've seen it, and I'm sure it won't be the last in Formula E. As you said earlier on, Katie, very tight margins. Everybody's trying to get those extra hundredths, thousandths of a second, and especially in the case of Lola Yamaha out, they may have sniffed an opportunity to try and get themselves into the points, and unfortunately for them, it resulted in that disqualification there for the most experienced driver on the Formula E grid, Lucas de Grassi. He's been here since pretty much day one. And on the other side of the garage, Zane Maloney, of course, the Barbadian driver making his debut in Formula E for season 11, still learning a fair amount, as are indeed, as I said, the whole team as a result of that new partnership. So, drivers now on attack mode laps. You can see the names illuminating in the magenta colour on the tower graphic on the left-hand side of your screen. Barnard in a full push lap at the moment, as we watch Tictum's side of the garage watching on. We cross over to Barnard's teammate, Sam Bird, looking at him, lighting up the timing screens.
Looks fine. So scenario 9, this will be a full push 350, full push 350.
You know what I learned yesterday, and maybe you both know this, but Taylor Barnard finished on the podium alongside Oliver Rowland. You know he used to race for Oliver Rowland's go-karting team.
Didn't he?
No, we saw, have you seen that picture of them? With Oliver pouring the champagne on over his head?
Somebody told me that this morning.
There's an incredible picture going around of him on the podium
sort of
supporting him, yeah.
I think it's quite funny, actually, when you look at the Neil McLaren garage, because you've got Taylor Barnard, who obviously is 19, very fresh face, and then you've got Sam Bird, who's got a fair bit more experience. It's sort of like you start here, you end up here, a little bit down the line. Barnard fastest now, leading a McLaren 1-2, Bird going into second quickest, but Barnard about to improve in time here, by the looks of things.
Well done for, you know...
Try to rescue that.
Trying to rescue that. You were about to say...
I know.
There's an old man there, and you went experienced, well played.
You know when you start
Sam will be pleased with that.
You know when you start something and you think to yourself, I've committed here and I've got to go all the way, but I've got to try and make it as kind as possible. Barnard then does improve by a couple of tenths of a second. Down at that first corner. Nato also popping himself up into third quickest. A disappointing day at the office yesterday for Norman Nato. Once again, 17th he was over the line. We were talking about it in the car on the way in, Katie. He just can't seem to catch a break. He's had technical issues all season long.
Yeah, he said out of 3 races, it's been a different technical issue every race. He's very frustrated, I think, because, you know, he's been quick, and obviously he knows with his teammate what's possible with his car and with the team, and to be the one that's not able to put that together, I think is very frustrating. And after a while, it can play on your head a bit. So I think that's what's nice about the double headers, though. That frustration, you can take it out on track the next day.
Yeah, good chance to reset and go again. We saw Jake Hughes coming to a stop a little bit earlier on in the session. As of now, we have not seen him back out on track. Saunders is down in pit lane catching up with the British driver. Let's see exactly what's happening with Jake Hughes and whether we'll see him out for the rest of the session.
Word as of yet from the team, but yeah, no official word. But I'm outside the garage right now. The side panels are off, the back end's off. There's 3 engineers with their heads in the back of the car trying to work out what's wrong with it. It doesn't look like he'll be going back out this session. So yeah, let's see what happens when it comes to a report on what the problem is. But the stop was related to just needing a full reset, so that's why they had to bring him in, do the full reset, and try and figure out what the problem is. But yeah, I don't hear anything more.
Yeah, thank you, Saunders. Very much appreciated. Just heard from McLaren's comms department, who've just sent us a message saying Taylor Barnard actually 20, not 19. I just said to him, I remember being 20. Now my knees make a noise when I stand up. So, such are the joys of ageing. There
You're only 28, Tom.
Hey, 28 in a couple of weeks, I'll have you know.
You're not even 30.
No, I'm clear.
Oh, God.
It's all downhill from here.
Yeah, car feels a lot more alive today, which is good. Happy.
Car feels more alive, that's what you want, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good to hear there for Sam Bird. Again, one of the most experienced drivers in Formula E, along with Lucas de Grassi. He's been here since season 1 and found a home at McLaren last year. Took that superlative victory at the Sao Paulo E-Prix in season 10 against Mitch Evans. Ever since then, it's been a challenging road for him. Of course, the break of the hand that he suffered in Monaco, missing a couple of rounds, and hopefully the results will start to come his way. Nato, meanwhile, now getting some important laps on the board. 3rd quickest for the Frenchman at the moment. Back with that Nissan team for season 11. Raced with them back in season 9. Got a podium in Rome. But last year at Andretti, had a really good relationship, actually, with Jake Dennis on the other side of the garage. But the team deciding to make a change. And as such, Norman going back to the Nissan team for season 11. And just getting stuck behind his former teammate here at the final couple of corners. just going to balk him a little bit and cost him, I think, a possibility of improving. He does improve in time there, does Norman Nasser, but maybe not quite as much as he would have done had he not been stuck behind the Andretti. So we're now coming down into the last 10 minutes of the session here, Katie. What do you think the drivers and teams are going to be planning for? Is it sort of qualifying practice from this point on, do you reckon?
Feels like a pretty long practice, doesn't it? We were saying it earlier, having 40 minutes of practice is quite a treat, especially when, you know, they've already been running all day yesterday.
You can see this, sorry, just having a look at Norman Nasser, you can see obviously he's in a attack mode lap there, but you can see the front powertrain there moving and pushing the wheels, but also the movement on the suspension over the curves here. This is going into turn 8. Looking nice and compliant here for him, but that curb on the right-hand side there, it just lifts up a little bit on the far right of that, essentially, and if you unsettle the car, it can chuck you a couple of metres offline, and the problem with that is, if you do that, there's a nice Tech Pro barrier greeting you on the outside.
Well, and when you're racing, there's probably another car.
Exactly.
Tom, you're talking to a driver here who's used to dampers moving feet. Got a millimetres on one of these. Katie's looking at it going, what's he talking about? It doesn't move.
To be fair, I'm sure it's a lot more uncomfortable in this when that happens.
Yeah, that is true.
I don't envy your back. How is your back now, Karun?
Old.
Is it?
Oh. Does it creak when you get up as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. So looking here at Mitch Evans in the Jaguar garage at the moment. Where's he? He's currently 10th fastest. Teammate Nick Cassidy down in 20th. Cassidy, as you can see, on a push lap at the moment in four-wheel drive in attack mode. Got a bit of traffic just up the road as he makes his way through the hairpin of turn 3. The Andretti just moving out the way there. Through turns 5 and 6 actually yesterday was when we saw a few drivers making mistakes into qualifying. It's one of the fastest parts of the track there, and it's a fair old haul into that corner that the drivers are having to do.
How did you find it when you did your scooter laps?
Not quite as dangerous, but then again I was with Karun and DC, so, you know, rough with the smooth and all that.
You were lethal.
Well, yeah, I know, but I was trying to be as aerodynamic as possible.
I would never want to see you go down one of the high streets of London. You would be an absolute liability to pedestrians.
It's the reason why I've got a plate in one of my collarbones falling off of things with two wheels. Yeah, I crashed a motorbike on a racetrack a few years ago. I haven't been back on one since. There's a reason for that, because I can't get the insurance anymore. Down in towards the final chicane we go then here with Nick Cassidy. Let's see what it's going to be like for him on this full attack mode lap. You can see the traction visibly better as he comes out of the corner, comes across the timing line, improved. He's only 9th fastest, so certainly not the quickest of the attack mode laps we've seen so far.
Amazing, isn't it? You look at that graphic that we had there, and the penultimate chicane, they're down to 25 mile an hour. You know, it's so tight for them to try and get the car turned around it, but it is impressive just how quickly then accelerates when you put the power down.
The virtual race engineer says that the cooler track should be quicker, so tyres not overheating at the moment. As we said, it's quite humid out there at the moment, and there is that threat of rain looming overhead. I know that sounds a bit bizarre, but we did have a bit of rain yesterday afternoon. We had a bit of rain just before free practice 3, which fortunately cleared quite quickly owing to the high air temperatures here. So let's see whether that develops.
Yeah, the cooler temperatures we have today will help with batteries as well. You know, one of the issues is if on the race today they haven't got the pit boost, so you're not going to get that boost of energy, the extra 10%, which will make this a more energy limited race. There's going to be more coasting, more regen, and the regen adds temperature to the battery. So it's, you know, having the cooler temperature is going to help that.
Well, speaking to Jay Dennis on the grid yesterday, he said after pit boost you should expect drivers to go pretty much flat out, and that is, all intents and purposes, what we saw, wasn't it? So are we expecting a pretty flat out race here this afternoon, or do you think
no,
the opposite?
The reason I'm saying it's the opposite, yeah, because they were able to go flat out because they had 10% more energy available to do the same number of laps, essentially.
Well, keen to see what is going to happen then. Still the same distance in that race, 31 laps, and of course those 2 attack mode deployments available for the teams and the drivers. Quite a few drivers now in the pit lane at the moment, including this man here, Nico Muller, who ended up facing the sky in Jeddah yesterday on the opening lap, courtesy of clattering into the back of Antonio Felix da Costa's Porsche on the opening lap. Speaking of the devil, there he is, as he makes his way through the chicane and runs it quite deep, actually, for that matter.
Wow, it was pretty close to the wall.
Yeah, that's a warning sign if ever you've got one there for da Costa. You can see a bit of rear instability just coming through into the next chicane there as well.
The car's not with him. It's just, he's got, you can see that, oh wait. He's just got no rear end.
I think he's going to be really trying to focus on his 300 kilowatt laps as well today, because that's where we saw him fall out of qualifying yesterday. He didn't make it through to the duels. Obviously, the group stages run in 300 kilowatts, and then the duels in 350, and I think he was the quickest in free practice too with 350, but he couldn't put it together with 300. He's obviously not happy here, Car's not doing what he wants it to.
No, you can see the oversteer there.
And I have that handbrake effect on the two last chicanes. I can't drive them. I cannot drive them.
Yeah, you can see the oversteer and corner entry there for Da Costa, and then having to put on more lock than full shopping trolley going into the next corner just to get the car rotated, but not happy with the balance of the car at all. Ultimately, he managed to recover to 9th place yesterday following those dramas on the opening lap. He had a bit of debris that came off of his car in the race, ended up then stuck on the racing line, and as a result it brought out quite a short safety car in the race to neutralise it. Both of those cars in the wars. Let's get down to... I beg your pardon, sorry, just had an update from Saunders in pit lane, who's just telling us that Jake Hughes' car, they're trying to get him out before the end of the session. So he's lost about 15 minutes of running. If they can get him out with 5 minutes to go, it's not ideal, but it's something, isn't it?
Massively valuable. They'll have a lot to do in those last few laps.
Yeah, exactly. Some running is better than no running at all. I have to say, hugely impressed with Nick de Vries yesterday. Came within a hair's breadth of that podium finish. 0.3 of a second he finished behind Taylor Barnard in the end, and yeah, got overtaken by the Briton in the closing stages of the race. But really impressive result for both him and the Mahindra team. Results were hard to come by in his return season last year, Karun, so nice to see the Dutchman performing as we know he can.
It's a hair's breadth different to a human breadth.
Slightly.
In terms of how close.
Maybe so.
Okay.
Maybe so. To be honest, half the sayings that come out of my mouth, I've got no idea where they originate from. I should probably do a bit more research, shouldn't I, really? But there we are.
Somebody should. I love it, though. It's great. Keeps it entertaining. Love it. Yes, no, it was a great race from him. Nick de Vries he looked behind, didn't he, in free practice, behind Mortara, but as the qualifying unfolded, he got quicker and quicker, more confident with the car. And in the race, he was absolutely there. He was, in the first stint, he was running third, and then as the pit stops cycled through and the attack modes, he was in that fight the entire way. He was in that fight amongst the top 5 league group.
Yeah, it was very impressive there from Nick de Vries. This man here will be looking for vengeance. Dan Ticktum in the Cupra Kiro, the customer Porsche powertrain in the back of that car now, and of course new investors that were announced this week, including a lineup comprised of Idris Elba, the actor. So nice to see that team has got some stability for what seemingly is the long-term future. Of course, formerly known as ERT and Neo and a few other names before that, and now moved over to the American ownership of the Kiro Group, partnered with Cupra as well. You can see Vern here also struggling with rear instability just through that final chicane, struggling to get that car into the corners. Otherwise okay, manages to improve in time and stays in 7th quickest here.
He's been sort of that 3/10 behind Gunther, hasn't he? All weekend, he's been that little chunk behind Gunther.
Well, the first comparison you have in racing is your teammate, isn't it? And when you're consistently behind him, as you say, as Vern has been pretty much all weekend, I guess they've got to try and figure out what it is that's causing that and how to close that deficit down before we get into qualifying.
It's exactly the same story, I think, with Jag. Evans seeming to handle whatever difficulties they're having better this weekend than Cassidy again in this practice.
Cassidy's obviously in this rut, as we say, and I don't want to touch too much on it because I don't want to feel like I'm bullying Nick Cassidy or anything like that, but, given where he was last year compared to where he is now, I think by his own admission he'd say it's not where they want to be. But how do you dig yourself out of a rut like that, when you're stuck in that position? How do you get yourself and your team and everybody motivated to be heading in that right direction?
Well, I think, he's incredibly experienced, so he'll have been in this situation in other racing series, I'm sure, in the past and in the previous years. I think a lot of it is just sticking with it in a way. There is some luck involved. Obviously, last year at the end of the year, we saw him with the absolute heartbreak in London. I think everybody felt that across the paddock. So it will turn, and I think you've just got to stay positive and keep keep giving 100%. Everybody in these teams are, though. You know, nobody is slacking. Everybody's doing late nights. Everybody is giving absolutely everything, and it is just so competitive.
Well, they always say that form is temporary, class is permanent, so hopefully we'll see some of that class rising to the top again for Nick Cassidy as Gunter goes back to the top of the pile.
He's having a great weekend, isn't he? Yesterday, pole position, fastest lap, and the race win. He's absolutely... We've seen this from Gunter in the past. There's that Jakarta weekend where, with Maserati, where he all of a sudden was just utterly dominant. And then for the rest of the season didn't really do the much, and then we suddenly saw highs of getting podium. So, yeah, you know, if he can iron out the inconsistencies, he will absolutely be a title contender this year, because if he could carry on the form from this weekend, he will be very hard to beat.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things that Gunter, as you said, has definitely struggled with over the last couple of seasons, and hopefully this is a turning point there for the German driver. We'll see that consistency and see him turning up to every weekend now that he's managed to unlock that potential that we know he is full of. Let's get down to Saunders for one final time in the pit lane before the end of this session. Saunders, what have you got for us?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'm here with Tommaso Volpe from Nissan. First of all, let's talk about yesterday, because Oliver Rowland was, as margins come, pretty fine margins away from getting that win. What stopped it from happening?
Well, we have to look at the data more in details back to the workshop, but probably we overconsumed a little bit too much during the attack mode, and that's why he paid it at the back at the end of the race, the very last lap. But this is part of the game.
So now looking forward to today, what have you learned in terms of strategy, maybe how energy sensitive this track is when you're in the open pack, that you can bring into today?
Well, the race is energy sensitive for sure, but it will be completely different from yesterday, of course. So it will be more a traditional Formula E race, or at least for what we saw last season. So on paper, this should be good for us, for our package and the way we manage races, but let's see.
Well, Roland just put it in the top 3, so the pace is there again.
Okay, if it happens all the time you call me, I will come more often.
Thanks, Tommaso.
Okay, thank you.
I think
we can see the Saunders.
Good. It's holds and snaps, hold and snaps. It's, I don't know. I'm sorry, but I'm a bit lost with all of this.
It folds and snaps, says Sebastian Buemi. Sounds like my washing after it's been stuck on the line for a few days too long. So
We've kind of seen that from a few teams, don't you think, in the body language of the cars this morning?
yeah, it does. It's definitely behaving different, and it's so interesting the difference a day can make. Because do you remember Diriyah last year? We saw this. You know, Jake Dennis went on and won one of the races in commanding style. The next day he was nowhere.
Yeah, I remember speaking to Roger about that after the race, and he said that it was a case of not being able to get the tyres and the temperature, which is kind of difficult to get your head around, because you think if you know how to do it one day, then you should be able to do it the next. But obviously different conditions out on track, and it just shows how sensitive it is.
That's it, yeah, as you say, very fine margins, and getting those tyres in the operating window. I mean, we talk about it so much in qualifying, Karun. We hear drivers, especially in the group stages, they're going out, they're doing a couple of push laps, a couple of cool laps to get everything down and then back up to the right temperatures. And being in that window, it's hard to overstate how critical that is.
Yeah, you know, the tyres are sensitive, some more than others, but I think in Formula E terms, you've got this sort of complex mishmash of trying to get the braking software working properly along with the regen and the brake balance, and to get that equation of tire temperature versus track grip versus the braking and regen elements all lined up is clearly a tricky thing to do. And Andretti, for example, right? That's something that they've consistently been complaining about for over a year now.
Checker flag then is now out. Good to see Jake Hughes has made it out onto the circuit, even if just for the last stages of this session. It does mean he'll get the chance to do at least an outlap just to check all the systems are working okay, and hopefully be able to do a practice start as well. So he gets a tiny bit of running in before qualifying later on. As we come over the line there for Sebastian Buemi, 16th quickest for him, struggling with the balance of that car, as have a few drivers so far here this afternoon in FP3, including Antonio Felix da Costa, who actually has managed to get himself up into 4th quickest. Evans on a bit of a quick one, but there's a fair old bit of traffic just up the road there as well.
Cassidy's struggling though, isn't he? He's on a lap here. He's going to catch the da Costa he's got in front of him.
Yeah, that's Evans just behind da Costa then here through the chicane. and Da Costa on a bit of a slower lap, I think. And Evans, will he improve in time? Did he lose it in that final sector? Comes to the checkered flag, and yeah, does just lose a little bit of time. What about Nick Cassidy? Personal best for him in that second sector, but still half a second shy of the quickest time set by Max Günther. Over the timing line for Nick Cassidy. Where is it on the board? And he remains 18th fastest, a second away from the quickest lap time set by Max Günther. So that is not where the Kiwi would have wanted to be. It is where this man, Jay Penske, would have wanted to be, though.
Günther's having a good weekend, isn't he?
He is, as indeed are the whole of the DS Penske team. And the face says it all for James Barkley, as we briefly saw there inside the Jaguar TCS Racing Garage.
Well, the top three are the same from yesterday's race, but in a slightly different order.
That's very true.
Yeah, Nissan having a great time in terms of powertrain results, because of course that's in the back of the McLaren. It's also, as you would expect, in the Nissan factory car of Oliver Rowland there as well. So yeah, very interesting to see how that's all working out. In terms of the Stellantis power cars, you've got Günther at the top. The next Stellantis power car is his teammate, Jean-Eric Vergne, in 11th.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? You got one Stellantis in the top 10, and that's the guy in first. You got 4 Nissans in the top 8, which shows how much progress they've made since last year, because we didn't often see that last year.
No, really impressive. The pace was always there, but the efficiency a little bit less so, and they seem to have really turned a corner in season 11 as we see Günther pulling away, or pulling himself into the grid position that he was in yesterday. This was where he lined up in pole.
He's fairly confident, isn't he?
Trying to repeat the same result. I mean, let's be fair, you wouldn't be hard to bet against him, given the fact that he's come out all guns blazing in
that launch, though. Is super impressive how quickly he got to 100 mile an hour in what, hardly anything there.
Yeah, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 1.82 seconds. These machines do. Very impressive performance from the Gen 3 Evo cars. And this is a sight that Tommaso Volpe would love to see later on. Both of his Nissan cars at the front end of the grid. Norman Nato and Oliver Rowland pulling away from the lights down towards that first corner. Be great to see Nato getting some points on the board here this afternoon after that challenging start with all the technical problems he's had.
How do you say politely it's not what my teammate has? How do you say that politely?
Well, there's an interesting team radio message from Nick Cassidy. I wasn't expecting that one. So he's not happy with the equipment, presumably, that his teammate has got compared to what he's running.
What's the subtext there? I don't get it.
Setup?
Setup, yeah, I mean, yeah, but...
Well, we'll have to do a bit of digging.
On.
Yeah, we'll have to do a bit of digging and find out what that message was all about there.
We'll send Saunders Carmichael down there. He's a good investigator, isn't he?
Intrepid reporter for Saunders. Let's see what he can do. Nick Cassidy ending up that session 18th fastest then. Not where he nor the team would have wanted to be. Hopefully they can spin some laps on the simulator, and Geoffrey Lafont, the race engineer of Nick Cassidy, they can work together, turn the setup around, and with a bit of luck transform that car ahead of qualifying. Joseph Rocker, I think he and Mitch Evans will be relatively pleased being the lead Jaguar powered car in 6th place, but they'll still be wanting more out of that and the chance to get themselves into those duels and hopefully into that fight for pole position here this afternoon as well. So let's get confirmation of the results from free practice 3 here in Jeddah then. It's Maximilian Günther, the winner from round 3 yesterday, who ends up on top here this afternoon ahead of Taylor Barnard and Oliver Rowland then. So the top 3 who finished the race yesterday are the top 3, slightly different order, in FP3, ahead of Antonio Felix da Costa and Pascal Wehrlein. Mitch Evans 6th quickest ahead of Sam Bird and Norman Nato, 4 Nissan powertrain cars inside the top 10. Dan Ticktum, another strong showing in the Cupra Kiro in 9th place ahead of Nick de Vries in the Mahindra. Just outside of the top 10, it is the next Stellantis powered car, the DS Penske of Jean-Eric Vergne ahead of Mortara, Van Dorn, Muller, Beckman. Then the 2 Envisions of Buemi and Fright. Nick Cassidy mired down in 18th place, a second off of the ultimate fastest pace, ahead of Lucas de Grassi, Jake Dennis, Zane Maloney, and then Jake Hughes, of course, with those technical problems thwarting any meaningful running for a good portion of that session. He's down in 22nd fastest. Hopefully they can get that all sorted. Well, there we go then. That does bring an end to free practice 3, and it sets us up quite nicely for qualifying. There is a threat of rain in the air, though. We saw that from our virtual race engineer in the session. You can see the clouds looming overhead. It's certainly not as clear of a day as it was yesterday. It's a lot more muggy and humid compared to 24 hours ago as well. And if we do get a bit of rain coming into it, well, it depends. Is it going to be a brief shower, or will the track end up being wetter than the Submarine's number plate? We'll wait and see. These are your top three, though. There is Oliver Rowland. There is Taylor Barnard in the Neon McLaren. Great session again from the youngster, 20 years old, and just, again, maturity beyond his years.
It really is great to see, isn't it? Especially when everyone speaks so much about how much experience comes into play with driving these cars. To see someone with fresh blood coming in and putting these results down is very, very impressive.
Wonderful. Well, let's go down and catch up then with Saunders. We heard Nick Cassidy on team radio a few minutes ago saying that he wasn't happy with the setup of the car, and it's not what his teammate has. What can you get for us there, Saunders?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, question directly to you now. We heard that team radio from Nick, kind of assuming or alleging that there was something not similar between him and Mitch. Can you give us any more information?
It's honestly just a sort of setup point, right? So we tried different things in a session like that. That seemed to work quite well with Mitch's car, and Nick was quite keen to try the same thing, but you can't change that in session. So, yeah, we got to go with what our run plan was at the start of the session. Unfortunately, yeah, a change like that is not that quick, and so that's something which the positive news is we found something that gave us particularly good 300 performance, but yeah, we'll debrief after the session, but clearly, yeah, things you can and can't change in session.
Let's just spin this way a bit, let the car come out. Okay, so now thoughts ahead of qualifying and, of course, the race, because it is a slightly different race there when it comes to energy.
Yeah, exactly. Without the pit stop, it's a different profile of race. We probably go back to a little bit what we've seen in the first couple of races to start this year, with attack mode having a big effect, the pack more closely grouped together. So yeah, it's back to what we've seen in Sao Paulo and Mexico, and you know, we know quality is going to be important here again. So it should be a closer pack race today.
So what does that make you feel in terms of confidence in the package then, based on those results? Because it's a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to Sao Paulo and Mexico.
Yeah, win in Sao Paulo and tough race in Mexico. But if you look at the race pace yesterday, although we had the issue in the opening lap with Mitch, actually his pace towards the end, we treated as a bit of a test session, and we were lapping the same pace as the leaders with Mitch. So that gives us some confidence. But honestly, we need to get all the elements right. We have to get the car balance right. We have to make sure we're being as efficient as we can. So it's, you know, we don't like to predict it. Our racing will do the talking, and we just got to do our homework now, get our heads down, and come and put our best foot forward in the race.
Thanks, James.
Thanks.
Yeah, nice to hear from James there, just answering the question that we wanted to find the answer to, which was what's going on with that team radio statement from Nick Cassidy, saying it's down to a difference in setup between himself and Mitch Evans. So, well, if they just chuck the same setup that Mitch Evans has got on it and Cassidy's able to extract the same performance out of it, I think he'll be pretty happy given where he's been so far this weekend. And time will tell as we head into qualifying. That's coming along the way in about an hour and a half's time now then. And we'll see what happens. Yesterday, it was Max Günther and Pascal Wehrlein on the front row of the grid, with Oliver Rowland and Taylor Barnard on that second row. Can this man make it 2 pole positions in 2 races? What do you reckon, Karun? Has he got a good possibility of doing that, given what we've seen so far?
Well, he was fastest in qualifying, won the race, had fastest lap, and was fastest in practice today. So I think he's got a decent chance.
Yeah. The momentum is certainly with him. Well, that then does bring an end to Free Practice 3 here in Jeddah. Qualifying, as I said, getting along the way in an hour and a half's time, and we look forward to seeing what is going to happen. Thank you so much for joining us here in the commentary box. We get ready for qualifying for round 4 here on the Jeddah Corniche circuit very shortly.